Why do witnesses believe anything printed in Watchtower publications? If we go to jw.org and click on See What's New, if we scroll down to the bottom of this subsequent page, you're going to see something that was recently posted last week. It's a video that's entitled Promoting Love and Respect for Truth. Let's give that a listen, shall we?
In today's media, much of what's presented as fact is often colored by emotion and personal opinion. Jehovah's Witnesses, however, remain committed to defending God's Word, the Bible, as the standard for truth. As Jesus said at John 17:17, "Your word is truth." The wide-ranging subject matter contained in the publications of Jehovah's Witnesses is painstakingly researched by their writing research department. Their research methods are modeled after that of Bible historians, such as Luke and Jeremiah, reliance on reputable first-hand sources.
We're not looking just for someone's opinions or what someone believes about a topic.
If the material is socially or politically biased, for example, we can't rely on it. We look for objective material.
We cover everything from historical, scientific, geographical, flora, fauna, space.
So before the script is even written, we'll provide a research package, and we'll follow the project till final delivery to make sure that everything that is said, everything that is shown is solidly based in fact, and that's well researched.
There's a lot more research than what the viewer or the reader will ever see.
You have a one-page article on the otter, you end up with like 12 references to back up every statement that's made.
It seems very simple, the height of Mont Blanc. And with the height of Mont Blanc, we found out, number one was 4,807 meters. Then we found another source, 4,810. Let's check a third one, 4,808. So what is now real? In that case, we had to consult the French National Institute of Geography and Forestry information.
This is a classic example of a distraction. By focusing on something benign like the altitude of this mountain, the viewer is left with the idea that if they're that diligent about getting accurate something as insignificant as the altitude of this mountain, they must use an equal amount of due diligence in researching everything else.
The main research tools is our own library system. We have about 65,000 books and other research materials.
If we're researching something about ancient history or archaeology, we may consult a specialized encyclopedia, like an encyclopedia of archaeological discoveries, for example.
Museum websites usually have pictures of what they have in the museum, and we can find these visuals and then send those off to production teams as well and say this is a good example of a first century lamp.
Things that you think are true because they are commonly known may not actually be totally accurate.
Quotes need to be verified. We want to go to the first-hand source, the original source for that quote. That's one thing. And secondly, context matters. We want to quote things properly.
When Gandhi and Lord Irwin came together, Gandhi said, "When your country and mine come together in the teachings of Christ and on the Sermon on the Mount, then we will have solved the problems of our countries and the world." So we researched it. No one could confirm that those two men ever met. So it's a great quote. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't refer to Jesus or even the Sermon on the Mount, but that particular one we couldn't use. So it's a great quote. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't refer to Jesus or even the Sermon on the Mount, but that particular one we couldn't use.
So to this point, we've determined that an example of poor scholarship that's given here by jw.org would be a situation where even though something that is commonly attributed to a source, if it cannot be confirmed, it would not be printed in jw.org publications. Because if it were, it would be an example of poor scholarship. Something about that quote, though, sounded familiar. So what I did is I went to my 2003 Watchtower library, and I looked up brochures. There's a brochure that's entitled Jehovah's Witnesses. Came out in 2000. If you have the library CD, the publication's referred to as JT. And it says practical value of the good news to your community was one of the subheadings of this brochure. Practical value of the good news to your community. And sure enough, it says in a reported conversation between the Hindu leader Mohandas Gandhi and former British Viceroy of India, Lord Irwin, a very different sentiment was expressed. It said that Lord Irwin asked Gandhi what he thought would solve the problems between Great Britain and India. Gandhi picked up a Bible, opened it to the 5th chapter of Matthew, and said, when your country and mine shall get together on the teachings laid down by Christ in the Sermon on the Mount, we shall have solved the problems not only of our countries, but those of the whole world. I knew that sounded familiar. So I could take a look at that on the 2003 library, but when I go to Watchtower Online Library, I can still see Jehovah's Witnesses as a brochure, and I can still see practical value of the good news to your community. But when I take a look at that paragraph, the first paragraph is now changed. It says, however, famous men like Gandhi have spoken highly of the value of such principles as those presented by Jesus. So the example that they gave in their video of an example of poor scholarship is something that at one time existed very, very recently in their own publication. So my question would be, were they exercising poor scholarship at the time that brochure was written, or at the time that the 2003 Watchtower Library was released? They must have been, because they changed it. So when they're holding out as an example something that they themselves were guilty of, it begs the question, what else about the references that I see and the research that's being done might also be lacking or reflective of poor scholarship? And the reason that becomes important is because what the Watchtower is trying to say, or what jw.org is in a sense trying to say, is you don't have to worry about doing research, because we'll do the research for you. Now, when you go to the library and you take out a book, a historical book for an example, a book typically has a bibliography where all of the research that was done references the author, who printed the book, what page the quote was on. It's very, very thoroughly presented to the reader. So when you look at a nonfiction book that has a bibliography, you have pages that are provided as specific references. That is never going to be the case on anything that is presented to you from jw.org. There's never a bibliography that shows you, we referred to this particular reference material, and we went to this page, and this is the specific quote. So therefore, if you want context, if context is so important, you can go and verify that for yourself. They do not encourage individual witnesses to do any of this research on their own. They do not provide the citation of the actual page, so a witness or a reader of this material could actually research that on their own. Rather, what they're trying to say is, trust us, we've done a thorough job, take our word for it, we'll do the research for you, you just read it and believe what you're reading is truth.
So the research work we're doing, sometimes it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Sometimes we don't find what we were expecting to find, but it's very gratifying because we're helping produce accurate information that our readers can rely on. Reliable information will help us make good, informed decisions.
Anyone who reads our journal, who sees our videos, can be confident, well, this was thoroughly researched. These are facts. This is the truth.
So when you consider the printed publications of Jehovah's Witnesses or peruse the jw.org website, you can be confident that the material is carefully researched and accurate. Why? Because Jehovah's Witnesses are a people who love and respect the truth.